And hello to you, and welcome to the Richard Nichols Podcast, the personal development podcast series that's here to help inspire, educate, and motivate you to be the best you can be. I'm psychotherapist Richard Nichols, and this is episode 211. It's titled Control. And if you're ready, we'll start the show. How are things, folks? Are you coping? Things are difficult at the minute, aren't they? And I totally understand that my cheery persona can be a bit incongruous when Putin is literally on the warpath. We're trying to learn how to live with COVID, and now we've also got to learn how to live with a war in practically our back garden. It's been a traumatic few years, and we're not going to forget it in a rush, are we? One thing it highlights for a lot of people, though, which is never a bad thing, is the importance of letting go of control. Because at the minute, a lot of our life is out of our hands. Yet at the same time, it gives us opportunities to concentrate on the things that are in our hands. And as long as we're okay with the things that we have no control over, we should all live happily ever after. That's not so easy, though, I've noticed lately. Not that all my private clients are control freaks, far from it. But the crap of the last few years has maybe exaggerated the control freak tendencies that are in most of us naturally anyway. And it's not always a bad thing, you know. Having controlling tendencies can make us meticulous and efficient. It gives us high standards. And when the world looks like it's falling apart, trying to gain a bit of extra control is a healthy coping strategy. But if we don't know that we have this tendency to use control over things as a way of compensating for our anxiety, then it can get out of hand. Because we can't actually control everything, can we? There's uncertainty out there. We never actually know about the future, and it's hard to be okay with that, especially at the minute. And control issues usually come from this impossible attempt at eliminating uncertainty in our life, because that's exactly what anxiety is there for. Anxiety is the unconscious emotional version of the negative thinking that used to be conscious and in our awareness and now has become background. Things like, what if things go wrong? And if it was up to me, I'd do it like that. Now, people without anxiety would have had those thoughts too, but they wouldn't have been repeated so often. They wouldn't have been focused upon. So, what if things go wrong? Just simply gets the answer, I don't know, I'll deal with it then. If it was up to me, I'd do it like that. Ends with, oh well, never mind, whatever. It's not that non-anxious people are uncaring, it's just that they're good at acceptance. They're well practiced at thinking, that's good enough. And knowing that underneath the urge to control is just plain old fear might make it easier for someone to accept things. And at the same time, make it easier for someone to accept controlling people. But we do need to challenge it. Eric Heltzer from Johns Hopkins University published an article in a journal I read once. He titled it, I'm going to read this, Control and the Good Life, Primary and Secondary Control as Distinct Indicators of Well-Being. And I found it important because it highlighted some of the differences between the effects of primary and secondary control. Primary control is adapting the external world to meet your expectations, and secondary control is about adapting ourselves to the external world. Useful, because in Heltzer's studies, both primary and secondary control are linked to well-being, but only primary control was linked to unhappiness. So, there are times that being a control freak can make you happy, but there are way more times that it will make you depressed. Like with macular degeneration, you get diagnosed with that and you're likely to be legally blind within 10 years. And in their 2016 study, read this one, Developmental Regulation with Progressive Vision Loss, Use of Control Strategies and Effective Well-Being. I love these snappy titles. The researchers from 6 different institutes worked together to study 364 adults diagnosed with age-related macular degeneration. They were given the diagnosis of going blind and monitored their thoughts about it, their attitude towards it, and found that over the 2 years of the study, those that had been able to shift their control strategies from primary to secondary had higher happiness levels and lower depression. They concluded with the phrase, "Goal adjustments and self-protective thinking may help to find pleasure even from restricted daily activities." Goal adjustments. That's probably the key, I think. When we accept what can't be controlled, we may well have to adjust our goals, our expectations. An old colleague of mine got throat cancer a few years ago now. He was a hypnotherapist and a trainer, and he was told that things would more than likely be okay, in that he'd survive. He might lose his voice. It might be that he'd never be able to properly speak again, but it was a small price to pay. And at the time, I thought, geez, what would I do if I lost my voice permanently? As a therapist, my job would change almost unrecognisably. As a podcaster, that part of my career is going to be over. How would I adjust? And I did think about it. Now, I'm not a control freak. I'm quite good at acceptance. But still, it kept me awake a little bit. The what-ifs, the worries. Yeah, I was fine. Turns out, so was Paul, in the end, my colleague. He lost 9 stone and his salivary glands don't work anymore, but he's still a therapist and still specialises in hypnosis. So all's well, really. But it's hard to accept what is sometimes. It's hard to adjust our goals, change our expectations. It relies on a strong sense of self and the ability to create a good enough as it is attitude towards your life. You've heard of the Serenity Prayer, I guess, haven't you? The theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, I think is how you pronounce his name. He wrote it in about 1933. It's been updated slightly, but it's pretty much the same now since it was adopted by Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs, as they're called. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. I love that. Who wouldn't? It makes absolute sense. What a great attitude to have. I first discovered that attitude existed when I was about 8. I was quite an avid reader when I was young, compared to other 8-year-olds. I used to read all the Enid Blyton mysteries, the famous 5, the secret 7. My favourite was the 5 Findouters. Don't know why, I like those ones the most, just really like the characters. Now, Enid Blyton was a clever woman, good writer. Now, those stories were really quite old-fashioned. They were old-fashioned then, let alone now. And so my granddad, who can see that I'm a bit more open-minded about my fiction reading, it didn't have to be Spider-Man and Mr. Magica, although I think I did read those as well, but he wanted to share with me some of his favourite stories. And he gave me a load of Biggles books. If you don't know who Biggles was, James Bigglesworth was a fictional First World War pilot who represented everything that was British when the books were published during the 1930s. Biggles combined professionalism with a gentlemanly air and has been parodied ever since. They were all right from what I remember, a bit dated, obviously, but I remember them fairly fondly. But mainly because of this quote from Spitfire Parade. Spitfire Parade is set in World War II. It's the book where you also meet Lord Bertie, a pilot from 666 Squadron, an eccentric former racing driver who flies with a monocle and a hunting horn. When I think about it now, it sounds absolutely hilarious, but was just accepted at the time. Anyway, Spitfire Parade has this amazing quote in it. The chapter is titled Biggles' Philosophy, and this is what the author W.E. Johns wrote. When you are flying, everything is all right, or it is not all right. If it is all right, there is no need to worry. If it is not all right, one of 2 things will happen. Either you will crash, or you will not crash. If you do not crash, there is no need to worry. If you do crash, one of 2 things is certain. Either you will be injured, or you will not be injured. If you are not injured, there is no need to worry. If you are injured, one of two things is certain. Either you will recover or you will not recover. If you recover, there is no need to worry. If you don't recover, you can't worry. And at age 8, I thought, I want to be Biggles. What an attitude. And you've probably heard me say on this podcast series something similar over the years, that there are two things in life, the things you can control and the things you can't. And there's no need to worry about the things that you can control. After all, you're in control of those things. And there's no need to worry about the things that you can't control, because you can't control those things. Well, there you go. It all started with Biggles. And I wish that all it took were just words to make this happen. I wish all you had to do was just listen to this podcast, hear me waffling on about Biggles, whilst you wondered, where the hell is he going with this one? Before the penny drops. But it takes more than words. It takes effort, actually. Sorry. It takes hard work. It's not easy to change your personality. I've watched my wife struggling with perfectionist traits and the effects it has on her need to control the external world. And even though I said to her last year, I think it was, I said, "You seem to be a lot better these last few years, hun." She raised her eyebrows and said, "Really? I think I'm getting worse sometimes." "Why is that?" says I. And she said, "Next door haven't rolled up their hosepipe properly and I can't stop thinking about it. I want to go around there and reel it up. Do you think they'd mind?" So I thought, yeah, well, maybe there is still a little bit of room for improvement, sweetie. Why don't you take a deep breath? Imagine that the hosepipe is attached to a load of helium balloons and just let them float away, taking the thoughts of the hosepipe with them. She didn't like that. "Don't tell me what to do. I don't need your help." All right, yeah, definitely room for improvement then, sweetie. I mean, she was laughing about it at the time, and she didn't go around there in the end, I don't think. But I think, having said that, that's probably just because we moved house. So who knows if we'd have stayed there, what she'd have done. But after trying to hang up two big, I think like 26 by 33 inch pictures on a wall recently, and watching her freak out about the distances between them and the exact measurements from the corner of the ceiling and the radiator compared to the height of the door and all these measurements, it's no surprise that they were still leaning against the wall for a fair few weeks afterwards before we did that, ready to do later. And there was no way on earth that she was going to let me do it. It's bad enough for her watching me prepare a meal. I can see her itching to step in and take over. So I know it's not easy when you feel the need to intervene into things, whether it's your children's homework, a wonky picture on a pub wall, or next door's hosepipe. We need what's called distress tolerance, which is exactly what it sounds like. Tolerating being distressed. Get used to it. Train your brain that you can wait. Because genuinely, when you feel the urge to correct someone's grammar, for example, it helps to simply try not to. Just for a bit. There are lots of reasons why pedants exist. I can be really pedantic, but that's probably because of slight imposter syndrome. I just want to appear clever if I'm feeling stupid. But an introvert can be really pedantic too, because of a need for order that errors will violate. Sigmund Freud once said that pedants are men who are unable to laugh at themselves. I would also point out that female pedants do exist, but I think he'd just say that I was proving his point and call me a pedantic fool. No, he wouldn't. He'd call me anal and he'd ask me about my childhood. No matter. Practice being uncomfortable about things. Practice delegating to others. If you have these perfectionist traits, then it's highly likely that you feel that no one else can do as good a job as you at those little things. Maybe the big things too, but definitely the cleaning, the tidying away, the folding of clothes. Let other people do it. Delegate. I'm 46 years old and I can't hang wallpaper properly because I've got a perfectionist, almost control freak of a wife. I'm okay with that and she's okay with that. But I want my son to learn how to do stuff, and whether that's ironing, cleaning the car, loading the dishwasher, hanging a picture, being okay with other people doing things differently does take practice. but you have to practice. It doesn't happen by itself. And when you do that, when you let other people do stuff, don't redo it yourself. That defeats the object. It puts across the idea that they can't be trusted, that they're not good enough. I mean, that's good for business for me and all the other psychotherapists, because the whole family are going to need therapy in the future, but it's not really what we want, is it? Anyway, look at the time. I always try to aim for 15 minutes for these episodes, and that's pretty much where we're up to. If you do want to hear more from me, do please consider coming on board through Patreon, where there's an episode every single Monday morning. You can subscribe through Apple Podcasts as well, but I put some hypnotherapy bits on Patreon on a Monday as well. Oh, and a little bit of extra news for you. Me and a colleague of mine, Fiona Biddle, we're collaborating on a podcast project. It's going to be called Therapy Natters, where we ask listeners for questions about therapy and mental health, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. We're going to get started on that very soon, so if you could submit a question to us, there's a link in the show notes to a form on my website where you can submit something. You can call yourself whatever you like. You can be anonymous if you prefer, of course. But if you've always wanted to ask me something, you can do. And in the next few weeks, we'll get recording. So, go and enjoy your month. Be good, stay safe, be biggles, and I'll talk to you again next time. Take care.